Every story leaves something behind. A whisper, a shadow, a question that was never answered. Here, we dig through the forgotten files, the unsolved mysteries, the chilling true crimes, and the horrors people wish had stayed buried. From haunted legends to real-life nightmares, every tale is pulled straight from the horror archives. So turn down the lights, put on your headphones, and step carefully, because once a story enters the horror archives, it never truly leaves.
This first story was sent in by a hiker in New Hampshire. It's called The Trail Register with tomorrow's date. And what makes this one unnerving is how something as simple as a sign-in sheet can make you feel like you were never supposed to leave that mountain. The last entry in the Trail Register was dated the next day. I noticed it because I always sign in when I start a hike, and I was scanning the column to see how many people were ahead of me on the loop. There were 4 names above mine, all dated that morning, but the 5th entry, the one directly below where I'd just written my name, already had a date, tomorrow's date, and a time, 6:14 a.m. I was hiking alone in the White Mountains of New Hampshire, late October, the kind of day where the fog sits low in the valleys and doesn't burn off. The trees had already dropped most of their leaves, so the forest had that skeletal transparency to it, where you can see deep between the trunks but everything still feels closed in. The trailhead parking lot had 2 other cars in it when I arrived. Both had New Hampshire plates. I told myself the date was a mistake. Someone got confused, wrote the wrong number. It happens, but the handwriting was careful. Nate small print, not a rushed scribble, and the name next to it was mine, my full name, first and last. I stood there for a while just staring at it. I hadn't written that. My entry was 1 line above, dated today with my initials and the time. This second entry was different handwriting, smaller, more precise, but it was undeniably my name. I took a photo of it and started hiking anyway. I don't know why. Stubbornness, maybe. Or the part of your brain that refuses to accept something that doesn't make sense. The first 2 miles were uneventful. Quiet, almost too quiet for a trail that supposedly had 4 other hikers on it. I didn't see anyone. Around mile 3, I found a trekking pole leaning against a tree just off the trail. It was a black diamond, fairly new. No damage, just propped there like someone had set it down and walked away. I left it. A mile later, I found a single boot, not a pair. One boot sitting in the middle of the trail, laces still tied. Size looked about the same as mine. The fog was getting thicker. I checked my phone. No signal, which I expected, but the time read 5:47. I'd started hiking at 9 a.m. It had not been almost 9 hours, but the light around me was wrong. It was dim, the kind of dim that comes right before sunrise or right after sunset. I turned around. I'm not ashamed of that. Something was wrong with the trail, or with me, or with the mountain itself. I hiked back faster than I should have, almost jogging on the downhill sections. The boot was gone. The trekking pole was gone. The trees looked the same in every direction. I made it back to the trailhead register as the last of the light disappeared. I opened it to look at the page again. My first entry was still there, but the entry below it, the one with tomorrow's date and my name, now had a second detail I swear wasn't there before. In the column for number in party, someone had written 2. And something about that last detail still bothers me. Number in party, 2. Like whatever was on that mountain with him, was planning to leave with him. The next story involves a house, not a haunted house exactly, more like a house that was already watching the people who walked through it. This one's called The Voicemail from the Open House. The voicemail was 3 minutes and 47 seconds long, and for the first 2 minutes, it was just the sound of someone breathing in a house I'd visited that afternoon. My wife and I were house hunting in the suburbs outside of Columbus, Ohio. We'd been to maybe 15 open houses over the past month. This one was a split level on a cul-de-sac, built in the 70s, updated kitchen, original everything else. The realtor hosting it was a woman named Diane who smiled too much and kept calling the wood paneling in the basement a retro feature. We walked through the house for maybe 20 minutes. Nothing remarkable. The layout was awkward, the yard was small, and the basement had a weird smell, like old adhesive and something faintly sweet underneath it. We left our contact info on the sign-in sheet and drove home. That evening, I had a voicemail from an unknown number. I assumed it was Diane following up. It wasn't her. The message started with a faint click, then breathing. Not heavy or labored. Slow, measured, like someone sitting still in a quiet room, just existing near the phone. I could hear the house in the background. I know that sounds strange, but every house has its own ambient sound, and I recognized this one. The low hum of the furnace, a faint ticking that I'd noticed during the open house, coming from a clock in the hallway. At about the 1-minute mark, I heard footsteps, slow, deliberate steps on hardwood, then carpet, then the creak of the basement stairs. I recognized that too. The third step from the top had groaned under my weight when I'd gone down there. The breathing continued, but now it was joined by a second sound, a different rhythm. Someone else was breathing further from the phone. The two sets of breathing didn't sync up. They overlapped in a way that made my skin crawl. At 2 minutes and 12 seconds, a voice whispered something. I've listened to it over 40 times. The best I can make out is they were here. Then the breathing closest to the phone stopped, and for a few seconds, all I could hear was the second person, further away, still breathing steadily. Then clearly, unmistakably, I heard my wife's name. Not whispered, spoken, calmly, the way you'd say someone's name to get their attention across a room. The voicemail ended 7 seconds later with another click. I called the number back. It rang once and went to a disconnected tone. I called Diane, the realtor. She said no one had been in the house after closing the open house at 4. She'd locked up herself. I asked if there were cameras. She said no. I drove back to the cul-de-sac the next morning. I don't know what I expected to find. The house looked the same. The lockbox was on the door. The sign was still in the yard. But there was one thing different. The sign-in sheet was visible through the front window, sitting on the kitchen counter where we'd filled it out. Even from outside, I could see that every name on it had been crossed out with a single careful line. Every name except ours. We didn't put in an offer. We stopped looking at houses for 2 months after that. When we finally started again, I searched the listing for that split level. It had been taken off the market. No sale recorded. No explanation. The listing photos were still cached online, and in one of them, a wide shot of the basement, there was a shape in the far corner that I hadn't noticed before. It could have been a shadow. It could have been a coat draped over something, but it was shaped like a person sitting on the floor with their knees drawn up. And the photo was taken before the open house, before anyone was supposed to be inside. And the idea that someone was down there during the open house, listening to every footstep above them, and then calling that number afterwards, knowing exactly who had walked through. That's the kind of thing that stays with you. This next story takes place in a hospital. It was submitted by someone recovering from surgery who received a phone call that no one on staff claims to have made. It's called the nurse who called my room at night. The phone in my hospital room rang at 2 in the morning, and the woman on the other end told me not to press the call button, no matter what I heard in the hallway. I was recovering from an appendectomy at a small regional hospital in western Pennsylvania. Nothing dramatic. Routine surgery, overnight observation, expected to go home the next afternoon. My room was on the 3rd floor, east wing. Semi-private, but the other bed was empty. The hallway lights had been dimmed for the night, and the only sounds were the usual ones. The soft beeping of monitors somewhere down the hall, the occasional squeak of shoes on linoleum. When the phone rang, I assumed it was a mistake, a misdial from the nurse's station. I picked it up and said hello. The voice was female, professional, calm in the way that medical professionals are calm when they are trying not to alarm you. She said she was a nurse on the floor and that there was a situation in the east wing. She told me to stay in bed, keep my door closed, and under no circumstances should I press the call button. I asked why. She said the call buttons were routing to the wrong station tonight and that pressing it might draw attention to my room. She said it like that. Draw attention, not alert the wrong person, not cause confusion. Draw attention, like my room being noticed was the danger. I asked what was happening in the hallway. She paused for a few seconds and then said someone is checking the rooms. Then she hung up. I sat there in the dark, holding the phone, listening. For a minute or two, there was nothing. Then I heard a door open somewhere down the hall. Not quickly, slowly, the way you open a door when you're trying not to wake someone. Then footsteps, then another door. It happened again and again. Each time the door was a little closer. Open, footsteps inside. Pause, footsteps out. Closer, move to the next one. I stared at my own door. It was closed but not locked. Hospital rooms don't lock from the inside. I could see the thin strip of light at the bottom. The footsteps were getting closer. I looked at the call button clipped to my bed rail. I didn't press it. I don't know if that was the right decision or not, but I didn't press it. The footsteps stopped outside my door. I could see a shadow in the gap at the bottom. 2 feet, standing still. Whoever it was stood there for what felt like a full minute, but was probably 20 seconds. Then the door handle moved. Just slightly. It depressed maybe a quarter of an inch, then stopped, then released. The footsteps moved on. One more door opened further down the hall, then silence. I didn't sleep. At 6 a.m., the day shift arrived and the hallway filled with normal noise. I asked the morning nurse about the call I'd received. She looked confused. She said no one from the nurse's station had called any rooms during the night. I asked about a disturbance in the east wing. She checked the log and said the night had been quiet. No incidents reported. I described the voice on the phone. She said only 3 nurses were on duty overnight in that wing, and she knew all of them. None of them had made that call. Before I was discharged that afternoon, I asked one more question. I asked if all the patients on the floor were accounted for that morning. The nurse hesitated. Then she said that the patient in room 312, 2 doors down from mine, had been found unresponsive during the 6 a.m. rounds. She said it quietly, like she wasn't sure she should be telling me. Time of death was estimated between 1 and 3 a.m. Room 312. That was the direction the footsteps had been heading, but they had passed my door first, and someone had called to make sure I stayed quiet when they did. And that one raises a question I don't think has a comfortable answer. If the call saved his life, who made it? And how did they know what was about to happen? This next story is one of the most disturbing submissions I've received in a while. It involves a storage unit, an inheritance, and the slow realization that you never really knew someone in your own family. It's called The Storage Unit I Inherited. When I cut the lock on my late uncle's storage unit, the first thing I smelled was perfume. Not old perfume, freshy, like someone had been inside that morning. My Uncle Gerald died in January. He was 71, lived alone in Tucson, and had almost no contact with our family for the last 15 years. I was named in his will mostly because there was no one else. He left me his truck, a savings account with about $4,000 in it, and a 10 by 15 storage unit at a facility off the interstate. The attorney said he'd been renting it since 2009. The facility was one of those sprawling complexes with orange rolling doors and no climate control. Gerald's unit was in the back row, furthest from the office. The padlock on it was heavy, industrial. I had to use bolt cutters because no key was found among his belongings. When the door rolled up, the perfume hit me immediately. Floral, sweet, completely wrong for a metal box in the Arizona heat that had supposedly been sealed for months. The unit was packed, floor to ceiling in some places, cardboard boxes, plastic bins, furniture covered in moving blankets. I started pulling things out. The first few boxes were what you'd expect. Old clothes, tax documents from the 90s, VHS tapes with no labels. But further back, things got organized in a way that felt deliberate, intentional. There was a filing cabinet, 4 drawers, each one labeled with a year: 2009, 2012, 2015, 2019. Inside each drawer were folders. Inside each folder were photographs, newspaper clippings, and handwritten notes. The photographs were all of women, different women, taken from a distance, in parking lots at gas stations through windows. None of them appeared to know they were being photographed. The newspaper clippings were missing persons reports, different cities across the Southwest. The dates on the clippings matched the years on the filing cabinet drawers. I stopped touching things. I stood in that unit with the sun beating down on the asphalt behind me, and I felt the ground tilt. The handwritten notes were detailed. Descriptions of routines, work schedules, what car they drove, what time they came home. One note in my uncle's handwriting, which I recognized from birthday cards he'd sent when I was a kid, read she parks in the back lot on Wednesdays. No cameras on that side. In the back corner of the unit, behind a couch wrapped in plastic, I found a large plastic bin with a sealed lid. I opened it. Inside were personal items: a purse, a watch, a pair of sandals, a phone with a cracked screen, a necklace with a small pendant. They didn't belong to one person. The styles were different. The sizes were different. Underneath the bin on the floor of the unit, there were stains. Dark, irregular stains that had seeped into the concrete. The perfume smell was strongest there. I called the police. They came out within the hour. I showed them everything. They sealed the unit and took my statement. A detective called me 2 days later and asked me to come in. He asked me questions about my uncle that I couldn't answer. When did I last see him? Did I know his friends? Had he ever mentioned anyone named Rosa or Denise or Catherine? I said no to everything because it was true. I didn't know him. Not really. The detective told me they'd identified items in the bin as belonging to 2 women who had been reported missing. One in 2012, one in 2019. Neither had been found. Then he told me something that made me feel like the walls of that little interview room were closing in. He said the storage unit had been accessed 6 times in the 3 months before my uncle died, but my uncle had been in hospice care for 4 of those months. He couldn't drive. He could barely walk. Someone else had a key. Someone else had been going in and out of that unit while my uncle was dying. And when I'd cut the lock off, the perfume I smelled wasn't old. It was recent. The police never told me if they found who else had access. I checked the news every few weeks, searching for the names the detective mentioned. Rosa, Denise, Catherine. Nothing new has come up. But I think about the perfume. I think about someone standing in that unit, surrounded by all of that evidence, breathing in the heat and the dark, and then larking up and walking away. And the last story tonight is the one that disturbed me the most to read. It was submitted by a volunteer search and rescue participant, and it involves patterns found in the woods during a search for a missing child. I'll warn you now, this one doesn't have a happy ending. It's called The Volunteer Search I Should Have Quit. We found the boy's shoe at the bottom of a ravine on the 2nd day of the search, and one of the veteran volunteers told me to stop looking after that. He didn't say why. He just said stop looking and go home. A 7-year-old had gone missing from a campground in the Ozarks. I was part of a volunteer search party organized through a local outdoors club. About 40 of us spread out across a grid, covering roughly 6 square miles of forest. Dense, hilly terrain, lots of creek beds and deadfall, the kind of landscape that swallows people. The first day was methodical. We walked our grid lines, called the boy's name, checked under logs and in hollows. I was paired with a man named Dale who'd done these searches before. He was quiet, focused, didn't speculate about what might have happened. I appreciated that. On the 2nd morning, we found the shoe, a small blue sneaker, muddy, sitting on a rock at the bottom of a shallow ravine. Dale radioed it in. We were told to mark the location and hold position. While we waited, Dale turned to me and said the thing about going home. I asked him what he meant. He looked at the shoe for a long time and then said sometimes they find things that mean the search is already over, and the people who keep looking are the ones who see things they can't forget. I thought he was talking about finding a body. I told him I could handle it. He shook his head. He said it's not always a body. The search coordinators redirected teams toward our area. By midday, we'd found a 2nd shoe, then a sock, then the boy's jacket, draped over a branch about 4 feet off the ground, not caught on it, placed there, folded once and hung over the branch like someone had set it out to dry. That bothered the search leader. I could tell by the way he looked at it and didn't touch it for a long time. A lost 7-year-old doesn't fold his jacket. He doesn't place things neatly. We pushed deeper into the ravine. The terrain got steeper. The trees were closer together, and the canopy blocked most of the light. Around 3 in the afternoon, I noticed something that made me stop walking. There were sticks arranged on the ground, not fallen naturally, placed in a pattern, a rough circle maybe 8 feet across, with lines radiating out from the center, like a wheel or a sun. In the center of the arrangement, there was a small pile of stones. Dale saw it too. He didn't radio it in immediately. He just stood there, looking at it with an expression I hadn't seen on his face before. He was afraid. This man who'd done dozens of searches, who told me he'd found remains before and handled it fine. He was afraid of sticks on the ground. He told me he'd seen something like this once before. A search in 2016. A girl who went missing from a state park campground. They'd found her clothes arranged in a trail leading into a ravine. They'd found a pattern on the ground, similar to this one but with different symbols. They'd found the girl's hair in the center of it, cut not pulled, placed in a small pile on the stones. They never found the girl. We radioed it in. The search shifted from volunteer-led to law enforcement-led within the hour. They brought in dogs. They brought in a forensic team. We were told to pull back to the staging area. Before I left the ravine, I looked back at the pattern one more time. There was something in the center pile of stones that I hadn't noticed before. A small piece of fabric. It was the same color as the boy's jacket. And on top of it, catching the last bit of light filtering through the canopy, there was a small clump of dark hair. I learned later that they found more patterns deeper in the ravine. 3 of them, each one older than the last, based on the decomposition of the materials used. The oldest one was estimated to be at least 10 years old. Each one had stones in the center. Each one had hair. The boy was never found. The official report called it an abduction by an unknown person or persons. But Dale told me something at the staging area before I drove home that I haven't been able to stop thinking about. He said in 2016, during the search for the girl, they'd set up trail cameras in the area around the patterns. The cameras captured 14 hours of footage overnight. In the morning, one of the cameras was pointed in a different direction than where they'd aimed it. It had been physically turned on its mount. The footage on that camera showed 9 hours of trees and then 5 hours of black. Not darkness, not night sky. Black, like something was standing directly in front of the lens, inches away for 5 hours. Motionless. They checked the other cameras. None of them captured anyone approaching the turned camera. Whatever stood in front of it for 5 hours didn't walk there from any direction the other cameras could see. I don't go into the Ozarks anymore. I don't volunteer for searches. And when I hear about a child going missing from a campground, I check the location. I check to see how close it is to a ravine.
And that's where tonight's file closes, but the archives are far from empty. If you enjoyed this story, make sure to subscribe and join us as we uncover more horrors, mysteries, and true crimes hidden in the horror archives. Until next time, keep the lights low, keep listening, because you never know what story we'll uncover next.